Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bella Gamer, and today we're going to be talking about the Envoy, or Envoy, however you want to say it. Envoy, I believe, is the correct pronunciation. I'm not going to look it up because people will comment about it regardless, so I don't know, let's get off my nose. Anyway, this is such an interesting class. Now, of course, if you are familiar with Starfinder First Edition, you're going to be getting a lot of the same stuff, but I've been making these videos with the kind of idea that people are checking out Starfinder for the first time, since we're kind of in this new age of tabletop. It really started with D&D 5e, and now Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Starfinder 2nd Edition, and many other games have been coming out, and more people are just getting interested in other games other than D&D, which is really cool. So I'm going to be giving this overall review as if you have not played any of the Starfinder stuff before. So I'm sure there are channels out there who are much more experienced with Starfinder First Edition than I am, and to be fair, I barely played it. So the Envoy is very interesting because it is a leadership style class. It's completely designed around leadership, but it's also like you play the quirky rogue kind of Han Solo-esque style character, right? You're witty and you're smart, but not in like a book smart kind of way, but in a street smart kind of way. And so this class kind of takes both roles of like the witty rogue and the valiant leader who leads from the front lines and mashes them together into an interesting mix. And it's really cool. I would probably call this the most protagonist-y class, though, if I'm going to be honest. Like the character who comes up, takes the reins, and tells everyone what to do, but everyone just likes them so much that they're okay with it. So starting off, I'm gonna piss you off. We're gonna look at his key attribute here, which is charisma, and it gets 8+ con mod 2 HP. So why is this gonna piss people off? Because in the Paizo Pathfinder 2e, Starfinder 2e community, if your main stat is an attack stat, then it's a waste. And that's kind of just the case with the Envoy here. The charisma is not used to attack people. It is used for damage, but, you know, people care more about hitting things than they do about anything else. Now, I think this is perfect, and it works really, really well. But from the comments I've been seeing and from the Reddit and all that kind of stuff, I'm just going to assume this is going to piss people off. It's not bad. If you're new to this, that's not bad. Charisma is really good. I like it. You're playing a narrative story, so having a character who's capable of facing or talking to people is very powerful in a lot of ways. But, you know, people like to hit things with big sticks. That's kind of just the Pathfinder space, Starfinder space at this time. But let's go and take a look at some of their proficiency starting off. So starting off with their attack and defense, we have up to martial weapon proficiency, which is really good, and up to light armor proficiency. So this class is definitely more orientated towards having more dex, which is really good in Starfinder because guns. There's all kinds of guns everywhere, and none of those use your strength to do damage. So hitting people accurately with dex-based weapons is really good. Now, you're not going to be the best at shooting people, but that's not your job. Your job is to be the Envoy and do a lot of other really, really cool things. On with their other proficiencies, we see that they're trained in perception, and they're expert in reflex and will saves, but not in fort saves. Again, I kind of mentioned this with the Solarium before, but that just makes a lot of sense for the system in general, and for this class in general as you're in space. The thing you're going to have to worry about more often than not is weird space magic and dodging grenades and all kinds of explosions. So, makes a lot of sense. Now, skill-wise, if you played Pathfinder 2nd Edition, or really any TTRPGs, you're going to recognize something that is very interesting, which is they got a lot of skills. So you start off with your choice of deception, diplomacy, or intimidation, and then you get an additional skill based on your leadership style, and then you get 6 plus your intelligence modifier. That's a lot of skills. Now, this is essentially the skill monkey of Starfinder, the space skill monkey, as it were. And It's really cool. I really like it. And it works exceptionally well with the design of the Envoy because the Envoy is a charisma-based class. So intelligence is not something they're going to want to put a lot of points into, especially with how the game is overall designed. And thus, to show your character's overall proficiency and know-how, you're going to have a high skill proficiencies, meaning your character just knows a lot of things and knows how to do a lot of things. So I like how the overall idea is you can have a smart character without playing an actually intelligent character. And the Envoy really sits well in this line. But yes, that's all stats, right? BLG, please tell us, what does the Envoy actually do? Why would I pick this class, especially because it's a charisma class, right? Well, the main thing about the Envoy, besides being a skill monkey, which is honestly one of its greater strengths, is its directives. Now, a directive is a unique feature to the Envoy, and more or less what it does is you give your allies a buff, you can give them reactions of some kind, and it can be a 1 or 2 action ability. When you use a 2 action ability, you get to act, and it's called leading by example. And the Envoy is pretty much completely centered around this, and that's all very much encapitalized by Get 'em. So Get 'em here is just a good damaging stat buff for your team, and damage necessarily not by actual damage, but by pure accuracy. So for a singular action, you can select an enemy within 60 feet that you can see, and you and your allies gain a +1 status bonus to attacks against the target until the beginning of your next turn. But if you use 2 actions to lead by example, you strike the target and you gain a status bonus to the damage roll equal to your charisma modifier. So your charisma is going to make your attacks do more damage. Regardless of whether the strike hits, you and your allies gain a +1 status bonus to the damage on subsequent strikes. It does say strikes specifically, so it's not all damage, but strikes made against the enemy until the start of your next turn. And you increase this damage at 5th, 10th, 15th, and 20th for a grand total of +5 by the end of the game, which is a lot. So a +1 to hit is really, really good. And a +1 or more extra damage if you just spend 2 actions on it, which, by the way, if you're going to strike the enemy at all during your turn, you might as well use the 2 action version. So honestly, there's really no reason to use the 1 action version of Get 'em besides the use with certain feats. But this is how the overall Envoy works. And so, even though it's a charisma-based class, I suppose, you're not here to do damage yourself. You're here to amp up your entire team's damage. So, I mean, increasing everyone's accuracy, including your own, and giving everyone a status bonus to their damages on top of it is insanely powerful. So the Envoy is going to be really good. Though, I think there's really only one kind of way to make the Envoy, or at least if you ask the Starfinder community, which is you're going to put a lot of points into your charisma to get as much extra damage to your team as possible. As a support role, that's kind of your thing. And then you're going to put a lot of points into dex so you can shoot people. You don't really need to worry about con if you're trying to stay away from the enemy. You can put some points into intelligence if you want to have a little bit more skill proficiencies or to increase skills based on intelligence, but you're probably going to put whatever remaining points into your wisdom to increase your will saves. So that's like the main way. But there are leadership styles, and one of the styles, which is called From the Front, is a much more strength and medium armor style build. So From the Front, your leadership skill is athletics, which uses your strength. You become trained in medium armor, and whenever you get a increase to your armor proficiencies, that also applies to medium armor. And then you gain a directive. So each of these leadership styles give you a skill, a perk, a directive. And the directive for this one is into position. So for 1 or 2 actions, you call on allies to get out of a threat area or close on a threat. Select an enemy within 60 feet. Allies within the target's reach can step as a reaction. Allies within 30 feet of you and not adjacent to the target can stride as a reaction, but must end closer to the target. So more or less, everyone who chooses to act on this gets into melee range, right? And then if you lead by example, You strike the target to focus their attention on you, causing that target to take a -1 circumstance penalty on attacks made against other creatures until the start of your next turn. So, more or less, you're directing aim towards you. Now, from the front is interesting, and you definitely can make it work. And that's, if I seem like I'm just kind of annoyed, it's because I just started making new videos for Pathfinder, Starfinder, whatever, right? And immediately people start hopping into the comments to just talk about, oh, I don't like this because stat not big enough. I don't like this because doesn't hit hard enough, and all kinds of stuff like that. And I really got to say, it's kind of annoying. I'm going to be real. It's kind of annoying because the fun of tabletop is you get to tell your story with your characters. There's no prerequisite that your character needs to be of a certain strength to have a good story with them. That's just absolutely not necessary. Do you want to play the story of a character who's really good at combat? Sure. But, don't treat that like that's the only way to play the game. It makes zero sense. From the front is decent if you want to play a more melee style of Envoy. And I will make special mention as well, you don't actually need to make a melee strike with the lead by example part. You can still use a ranged weapon. Now, of course, to use medium armor, it kind of gives you flex stats, right? So you get a little bit of strength to wear the armor, and then you can still put points into dex to get the most out of the armor. So you kind of have the ability to do some strength-based things and do some range-based things. Not optimally, sure, but you still have the capability of doing so. And in all honesty, despite the fact that this gives you athletics and medium armor, you could still go full dex if you really want to. But from the front really leans more into a character who at least has a little bit of strength, which, is just going to make your other stats a little bit lower, especially because if you plan on being more frontline, then you're going to want some con, and that's just a lot of stat requirements. So I feel like some of these leadership styles are really good, and some of them can be unintentionally traps for people who are not ready for that style of play. And I mean, here, let me go into another one because I think this one really encapsulates my idea. So there's Infosphere Director, right? So this is the computer techie one. You play the man in the back who is on the computer telling everyone what to do. You gain computers as a skill proficiency. You gain the digital diversion as a bonus feat, which allows you to, distract enemies using tech. And then leadership directive is digital assessment. With this, you can spend 1 or 2 actions like any other directive to choose a creature within 100 feet and recall knowledge about that target. When you succeed at identifying your target with recall knowledge, you note a resistance or immunity in the creature's defenses in addition to any other benefits. If you lead by example by spending 2 actions, you can strike the target. You and your allies gain a +1 circumstance bonus to AC against attacks made by the target until the start of your next turn. If the target has the tech trait, it must make a fort save against your class DC, and on a failure, the target becomes glitching 1. The target is then immune to digital assessment for an hour. So digital assessment, more or less, is you can designate an enemy to gain a circumstance bonus to AC, as well as allowing you to recall knowledge about the target and giving you some pertinent information about it. Now, digital assessment obviously wants you to kind of go more down an intelligence route, right? But I'm going to say the Envoy does not have many feats kind of orientated towards intelligence or at all. And in fact, that's kind of the same problem that came up with Into Position. There's not a lot of feats that are orientated towards the use of strength. This class has a lot of charisma-based feats and actions because it's a charisma-based class, and it has a lot of feats about helping your allies. Can you play other ways? Sure, but I feel like the class doesn't lean hard enough into other stats, so it makes these leadership styles not necessarily like subclasses, right? They don't necessarily completely determine what your character plays like. Instead, these are supposed to be like your character can do a little bit of some other stuff instead, right? Because again, you don't need to have high intelligence to use computers. If you have a good proficiency, that can do most of the work. you're not going to be as good as an intelligence-based character. And if you really want to focus on it, I mean, you can, but the rest of the class doesn't really lean into that. Now, I think the Envoy is amazing if you want to go into like multi-class archetyping or archetyping in general, because then you can lean more into the kind of stats that you want to lean into. But overall, the Envoy feels it's a good class. All right. So it sounds like I'm griping, right? The problem is I'm trying to present this information to people who are going to look at this and then hear what everyone else is going to be saying about it. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, you are not going to be good at a lot of things other than charisma-based things, or at least you're not going to be amazing at it. You can still do it, and you can still make a lot of those kind of checks, but still, the class mostly leans into charisma-based things. So if you hard invest in other stats, just know that the class mostly doesn't support a lot of that, but that doesn't mean you can't use it, right? You can still be a very intelligence-based character, take a lot of feats based on recalling knowledge, and even multi-class in archetype into different kind of classes that allow you to make more use of those stats and still be really good. Many of these features still really work super well. And that kind of leans extra into kind of one of the core features of the class. One, you get a skill increase at every rank or every level. So at every level, you're increasing your stats, meaning towards the end of the game, you're going to be legendary in many skills, which is really good. Also, you get adaptive talent at 3rd level, and it improves at both 9th and 15th level. And what this one does is it gives you additional skill feats. So your character can use extra skill feats, and not only that, but you can change these skill feats every day. These skill feats don't account for any like prerequisites for any class features or non-class features that you might want to pick up, but it allows you to say, for instance, take multilingual on a day where you know you're going to be talking to many different types of people and cultures, or a particular culture, for instance. And at 9th and 15th level, it increases by an additional feat, allowing your character to be incredibly flexible and fit a lot of roles. In narrative, in exploration, the Envoy fits a lot of roles. It can fit into a lot of different positions. And if you are a very smart player, and if you're a player who really likes the roleplay and really likes the overall narrative of the game, I feel like Envoy's a really, really good class for you. I just hate it that people always think combat is the only part of the game. And to be fair, the characters are kind of designed that way because, yes, while we have a lot of skill increases and we have adaptive talent, and hey, we even have feats like Wise to the Game, which gives you a bonus to prevent being deceived, right? So you get a +1 status bonus to perception DC against attempts to feint or lie to you. Feint is good in combat. And attempts to divert your attention with creative diversion, and a +1 status bonus to your will DC against emotion effects. All really good things. And we even have things like improved mastery, which you get at 5th level, which gives you a once per day master proficiency in a skill, which is insane. Almost, I can't think of any class in Starfinder or Pathfinder that gives you master proficiency, essentially, before you would normally be able to get access to those at 7th level. All this and all their class feats are pretty much, almost all of them, are just combat orientated. And it brings up an overall issue I have with how Paizo has been designing many of the classes, because the Envoy really encapsulates this class is capable of so much outside of combat, but there's no real systems or really mechanics that are deeper than just a skill check to interact with outside of combat. So, of course, feats and abilities are going to be orientated towards combat, which is the most developed thing. I've played many games that have systems that are not combat related. Pathfinder barely has any. They have a little bit of a friendliness kind of system. If you make impressions with NPCs, sure, but it's very surface level, doesn't really do a whole bunch, and there's not really ways you can properly engage or even like play the game of social encounters, right? You just make skill checks and you succeed. Maybe you can have a skill feat that allows you to make checks against a crowd of people at once, but there's not really anything to really dig your teeth into. I know it's been a lot of griping. It's just because there's so much potential in the Envoy, and I think this is such a fun class. But this class particularly makes me rub a little rough against the overall design principles set by Paizo. It's still a great game. It's still a good game. But let me talk about the rest of their features first, and then I'll really get into it, right? So at 7th level, we gain access to Steel Yourselves, another directive. Now, without taking any feats, we have 3 directives, but the problem is we can only really use 1 directive per round unless stated otherwise, which kind of sucks, especially because it just means that, like, directives should be a thing, right? That overall should be situational. But with Get 'em, which is just objectively such a good combat-based directive, it's hard to think of any other use for it. And most directives are very combat-orientated. This one here, Steel Yourselves, is no different. So with this one, with 1 action, allies within 60 feet of you who can sense you can spend 1 action on their turn to brace for impact. This action has a concentrate trait, and creatures that brace for impact gain temp HP equal to your charisma modifier plus half your level for a minute. And if you spend 2 actions, you brace for impact yourself, gaining this temp HP, and you and any ally who braces for impact before the start of your next turn also get a +1 status bonus to saving throws against effects that deal damage for a minute, which is insanely good. And honestly, Steel Yourselves is really good to use once in a combat and then never again, because that status bonus to saving throws is solid for a minute, which most combats are less than. And the temp HP can only be really re-upped, but you lose some of the value of temp HP an ally might already have. So really, Steel Yourselves is just, you start the combat off, and to be fair, you can only use this one once per hour to get a big bonus to your stats for defense purposes and then keep going. But I could see someone arguing, yeah, or we could just use Get 'em and get very, I can attack and give everyone a big damage bonus, and the enemies will die faster, and we won't need to worry about the temp HP as much. Which is kind of true, right? I mean, depending on how your GM sets up combat. So it makes it somewhat hard for me to say, is Steel Yourselves good? I think it is. I think it's a really good combat starter. But I could see equally that depending on how the combats are run, if there's just a lot of White Rune combats, for instance, you might as well just kill the enemies faster, right? Because then you can just heal yourselves afterwards. The Envoy also has a lot of really interesting, like, additional features as they level up that most classes don't. Most classes don't get as many things just by leveling up as the Envoy does. So one, for instance, is Hidden Agenda. So when a creature rolls a critical success to sense motive against you, or a skill check to gather information or recall knowledge about your secrets, they get a success instead. When you roll a critical failure on a saving throw against an effect that would allow them to read your thoughts or reveal your motives, they get a failure instead, which is really cool. How often does this come up in your games, though? Sometimes, maybe, very rarely. It's super interesting, and it really leans into a much more, like, talky, political-based campaign, right? It's really, really cool. I really, really like this. And then we even have Inscrutable, which just makes it even stronger, where enemies that roll a perception or a sense motive against you or gather information to recall knowledge, they just get a failure instead of a success. Even if they get a critical success, they get a failure. You're unable to be read, which is really, really cool. And when you roll a crit failure or failure on a saving throw against such effects mentioned before, then you just get a success instead. So you just can't be read. It's really, really cool. It makes your character feel incredibly tactful in most social situations. And heck, we even have Tactician at 13th level, which, when you aren't directing your allies, you focus on the situation at hand. At the end of each of your turns, you gain an additional reaction, which you can use before the beginning of your next turn for any Envoy reactions. Multiple reactions to do more things. This class feels like it's bursting at the seams with just general class features. It feels like you could take any kind of feats or do any kind of multi-classing to really, and the class just works fine because it kind of does. It's really, really good. Heck, even that Master Improviser feature I mentioned before, well, we get Savvy Improviser, which allows you to do it 2 times per day instead. And the first time in a day when you would roll a natural 1 on a deception, diplomacy, or intimidation check, you don't automatically reduce the degree of success. I mean, you still probably get a failure, but if your stats are good enough, you won't. Pretty interesting, and again, very, very cool outside of combat. And this gets even better with legendary improvisation, which just gives you legendary proficiency rather than master, which is insanely powerful. Like, of their class features, the only one I kind of don't like is Silver Tongue. They get at 19th level. It's a free action you can use once per day per skill, and it's for the skills Deception, Diplomacy, Intimidation, or Leadership. But when you roll these check, you can roll the check twice and take the better result. I feel like Silver Tongue should be way earlier in their kit, but that's just me. That's my gripe. Like, the class works really, really, really well. They add so much damage to the battlefield just by we haven't even gotten into the feats. The class at its core is insanely good. There's almost nothing your character is not going to be good at, or at least not if you don't think about it by using your improvised mastery ability. And it's so good. And I really, really wish that there was just more to the game than combat, right? Because, yeah, sure, you could say there is, and your stories might have a lot of those kind of moments, but I want mechanics. I want things to interact with in those scenes, not just skill checks. Skill checks are the most baseline, yes, no, binary kind of situation you can be in. I would want something that can be a little bit deeper than that, you know? And the Envoy just makes, like, you never hear me make this rant about any other class, but the Envoy really makes me wish for something greater. But let's take a look at their feats. I know I spent a lot of this ranting, but it just because it's one of those situations where it really strikes me how lopsided the overall design for these kind of games can be. But let's look at their feats. So their feats kind of are split up into 2 major categories. There's the Devilish Rogue, who's very smart, quippy, can do all kinds of things to mess with the enemies, and is just smooth. And then there's like the Leadership Help actions, which are really, really powerful, including additional directives, which again would be great if we didn't have just one directive at a time, which is, I mean, besides a couple of feats, obviously. So, yeah, anyway, let's get started. So, first, let's talk about the Devilish Rogue ones, because I think these are some of the most fun. So, starting off at level 1, you can get Pardon Me. Pardon Me is really good because you can use Deception instead of Acrobatics to tumble through a target's square by targeting their Will DC rather than their Reflex DC. And when you successfully tumble through using Deception, then the enemy also becomes suppressed, which reduces their ability to hit people and makes them slower, which is really cool. You bamboozle an enemy with Deception rather than acrobatic moves, and it's really, really cool. Now, granted, if you're doing this, typically your character is really close to an enemy, but in this game that probably isn't a big thing because most enemies want to be ranged anyway. But still, I really like this, and it allows you to use your core attribute, Charisma, with Deception over something like Dex, which you might not be as good at. And honestly, being able to get out of a sticky situation is just a really good feature. And this is all at level 1. That's insanely good. Then we have Dirty Retort. Insanely good. As a reaction, when a creature misses you with a melee strike, you turn the tables on the attacker with some kind of dirty trick, throwing dirt in their face, pulling the shirt over their head, whatever. The triggering enemy becomes your choice of either Clumsy One or Enfeebled One until the end of its next turn. Enfeebled One is really good if it's a melee type enemy, but for most enemies in the game, you're probably going to use Clumsy One because not only does that make it harder for them to avoid things, you know, like their AC because it's Dex based, but also their reflex saving throws, which are also pretty big in this system as well. So Dirty Retort, again, you got that main character energy. You do some kind of trick on an enemy who misses you with an attack and just make an utter fool out of them. I imagine this particular feat is going to drive GMs insane when the BBEG misses with one of its attacks, rarely, but sometimes, and then the player just makes a complete fool out of them when you're trying to make, Zarbon the Destroyer look really cool in your scene. It kind of sucks, but I love this for the player, at least. And then we also have Distant Feint, because being able to feint an enemy at a distance, which if you're unfamiliar, when you feint an enemy, they become off guard, which reduces their AC by 2. This is normally something you can only do to an enemy who's adjacent to you. But as Starfinder is a gun-based game, that doesn't happen super often. And so Distant Feint is insanely good because you can target an enemy up to 100 feet and then feint them. And feinting uses your deception skill and your charisma attribute modifier. So you can feint an enemy at a distance to shoot them even better. Now, is this something you're going to be doing a lot? Probably not, because you're probably going to want to be using a two-action directive more often, but you can feint the enemy and then use something like Get 'em, which allows you to strike the enemy, which is really good. So Distant Feint is going to be really, really good if you want to play a true like pistolero style, laser pistol fighter, or even like a rifle fighter, honestly. It's got that pizzazz to it that I really, really like. And lastly, I want to talk about Cut 'em Deep. Now, Cut 'em Deep is really, really good. It requires that you're a master in Intimidation, which is not hard considering that you are in an Envoy. And when you roll a failure on a demoralized action, you get a success instead. So you just have a probably like 80% chance or more of just demoralizing an enemy, like depending on their will DC at all. The only thing that fails is a crit failure, which is very unlikely. So right out the gate, you can demoralize pretty much anyone, even like a BBEG. But in addition to this, when you successfully demoralize the target of your Get 'em, the target doesn't become immune to your further demoralize attempts. What this means, so normally in the game, in a combat scenario, when you demoralize an enemy, they then become immune to this for like an hour. So Demoralize gives the enemy the frightened condition, which reduces all their checks and all their DCs. It's an insanely powerful debuff. This 1 feat here not only makes it where you're almost always going to get that debuff off, but in addition to it, if they're the target of Get 'em, which is probably the best directive you're going to have access to anyway, then you can keep demoralizing them. You can just be like, demoralize, get 'em, demoralize, get 'em. And not only will the enemy just have reduced AC and thus more likely to be hit, but now you and your allies get a bonus to hit with Get 'em and are doing extra damage if you're using the 2-action version of Get 'em to do extra damage based on your charisma modifier. Cut 'em Deep just completely levels the playing field when it comes to the Envoy and your overall like combat capabilities. You give the enemy a -1, give yourself a +2. Wow, that's better, honestly, than just having a high dex. It's really, really good. And it's all based on your charisma. Despite all my complaining about feats being pretty much only combat based, there are a few that aren't, but they're few and far between. So let's check out Influence here. Influence is a reaction you can use once per day when you're about to roll a Deception, Diplomacy, or Intimidation check, and you essentially roll twice and take the better result. So once per day, as a reaction, you get advantage on the roll, essentially. That's cool, but why is it once per day? I mean, this feels like something that would be really good in a lot of situations. Yeah, sure, not spammable. Yeah, I get that. But like once per hour, something like that, especially because Influence, I mean, it's based on your character's overall like it's based on your character's overall like machismo. I don't know. It's so strange. And I wish, and it's once per day, a feat that is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, getting advantage is good, but like once per day, I don't even know if that's worth the feat pickup. You'd get much more use out of many of the other feats. Or let's talk about one that has its kind of own feat line, Size Up. Now there's a lot of text here, but more or less you can spend a minute observing a specific individual, 10 minutes researching a specific individual on an infosphere, so someone whose information is available online, or an hour networking and gathering information on a target. This art subject becomes your asset. And Against your asset, you get a +1 circumstance bonus to deception, diplomacy, intimidation, and perception checks against or in relation to your asset, and a +1 circumstance bonus to attempts to recall knowledge about your asset. You gain the benefits of the 2-action get 'em when using the 1-action get 'em on your asset, which is insanely cool. And you can maintain a number of assets equal to your charisma modifier. Now, if you size up another asset after that, your new asset replaces a previous one. So more or less, lots of bonuses against a target, but you have to observe them for a minute, which is insane. And you can only size an enemy up or someone up once per hour. Now, considering one of these takes an hour to do, that's not a bad thing, but like this is impossible to use in combat, right? And so many people out there are going to say, don't take this one. You can't use it in combat unless you take the level 2 feat of acquire assets. Now, this is an action, it has flourish, and you need size up to take it. But you assess a foe while in the thick of battle by observing the reactions to your attack. Make a melee or range strike against a creature that isn't your asset, and on hit, your target becomes your asset as if you had sized them up. On a critical hit, you also immediately attempt a check to recall knowledge about the target. So now it's a combat feature, right? And the interesting thing here is acquire asset doesn't say you use size up. All it says is on hit, your target becomes your asset as if you had used size up. So it doesn't have the hour cooldown that size up normally has. So now this is a super combat feature that allows you to use get 'em for 2 actions as a singular action and gives you a bunch of benefits to your abilities against the enemy. And acquire asset suddenly turns size up, which is a very interesting narrative tool to show that you're watching someone, to get advantage on them in social situations, all that kind of stuff, and turns it into a combat feature that is what our players are going to be mostly focused on because, right, combat is the thing. And it's really good. I think this is the way to go, especially if you do like doing the social stuff with size up. Acquire asset allows you to just get the benefits of it in combat. So if you're going down that route anyway, might as well. But I just feel like how people are going to generally talk about it is they're going to say, don't take size up unless you're getting acquire asset, because otherwise you're not going to be able to use it in combat and it's going to be worthless to you. And that's just not the case. Size up is really, really good, but there's no winning in social situations, or at least it doesn't feel like it to a lot of people. There's just, oh yeah, all right, we beat that skill check. Cool. Moving on. Where combat actually feels like a competition that players can win. You know what I mean? But let's go ahead and talk about their leadership feats, and then I'll close this video out in the most succinct way as I can, as I've been rambling quite a bit. So let's start off with Watch Out, another level 1 feat here. And it's a reaction. With the trigger, a creature targets an ally within 60 feet with an attack, and you can see both the attacker and your ally. You signal a warning to your ally, granting them a +2 circumstance bonus to their AC against the triggering attack. That's really good. It's not good if your ally is using something like a shield, but that's not going to be super common, I feel like, in Starfinder. So Watch Out's really good. A +2 AC is massive. And a reaction on a class that doesn't innately get reactions, at level 1, this is a really, really good feat, especially if you're taking that leadership role. Then we have Hang In There. Now, this feat, I think, is atrociously written, or at least the overall design is confusing. But what it does, and it requires you're an expert in diplomacy, is as an action, you attempt to psych your allies up, granting them temp HP. Choose yourself or an ally within 30 feet, and then attempt a DC 20 diplomacy check. Now, the rest of the text goes on to say what happens if you select higher DCs, which essentially increases the amount of temp HP it gives. But if you're trying to read through the feat the first time to see whether you want to take it or not, it takes a really long time to tell you exactly what the feat does, just telling you when it gets benefits when you don't know the relevancy of the numbers. How I would have done this is, after it says the DC 20 diplomacy check, I would then put the table that's right here in the middle, where if you get a critical success on this check, the target gains temp HP equal to double their level plus charisma modifier. Double level plus charisma modifier is insane. At 6th level, base, when you take this up, you and your ally probably are the same level, right? So if you crit this, which by the way, a DC 20 at 6th is actually not that hard, especially for a class like this, especially for one that has master improvisation. So you could easily give them 12 plus probably 16 temp HP for a singular action. Now, if you just succeed this check, then they gain temp HP equal to their level plus your charisma modifier, which is still probably 10. Really, really good. And then failure, the target is unaffected and you can't use hang on there for a minute, which is really bad. And a crit failure, target is unaffected and you can't use this again for an hour. So this is a very high stakes roll. And with how rolling a d20 goes, you have just an equal chance of rolling a 20 as a 1. So I don't like the failure effect being that you can't use it again for a minute, but the fact that you can just stack on temp HP, which by the way, now let me read the rest of the text. So if the DC is 30, you increase the temp HP gained by this by 5. And if you do need master proficiency, I should say. And if you have legendary proficiency, you can do a DC 40 check. And if you succeed, they gain 10. 5 and 10 HP, especially at the levels that you would probably be able to get those DCs. I mean, they're just well, you're probably going to smash the DC 20 check, so you might as well go for a 30. But twice level, I would probably go for the DC 20 check, even if I know I could safely make a DC 30 check, honestly. The twice level is insanely good. And especially the DC 41, that's insanely hard to do, even towards the end of the game. So, that being said, the DC 20 just always, because it scales based on level, which is really, really good. The plus 5 or plus 10 is meh. Whatever. Regardless, the target of this effect, the target then becomes immune for a day, which is a little devastating, but that's a lot of temp HP. And depending on the number of combats you're getting into, I mean, like, you could throw one of these on an ally per combat or in the most dangerous combat in a day. I think the day cooldown is a little long, if I'm going to be honest. I would have been happy with an hour, but still, it's really good. It's very, very powerful. Hang in there is really good as a leadership type feat. And the Envoy, by the way, has a lot of generally like healing-y type feats. Will they be the best at healing? Probably not, but they got a lot that can keep the team going, which is kind of what their overall design is. Going down this line some more, we have You Can Do It at level 14. Now this one is really, really good because for a singular action, as long as your last action was a 1 action directive, you give an ally within 60 feet as a free action for them, the lead by example effect for whatever the directive is. So for instance, if you used the 1 action Get 'em, then you can have an ally within 60 feet use a free action to strike an enemy, adding your charisma modifier to it and for everyone on your team, including yourself. So it just lets your ally do the attack instead of you, which is really good. And there's a lot of directives that this one in particular is really, really cool. And I think this feat pairs off really well with secondary directive, which is a level 12 feat that allows you to, if your last action this turn was to use a 2 action directive, is to use the 1 action version of Get 'em, as long as you make a strike and it hits a target, which gives you 2 directives at once. So this makes it where, so you can choose when you take your 2 action directives to get the benefit to yourself, or you can give them to your ally, and you can make use of Get 'em quite a bit. Like, there's a lot of mixing and matching these 2 feats really do to allow you to be a really strategic fighter on the battlefield, which is really, really cool. And it allows your allies to kind of participate in your actions overall, which I think is really cool. Though, they have a busted feat at level 10. It's called Got 'em. It's a free action you can use once per round when an ally strike hits a target of an enemy that you targeted with Get 'em. You provide a quick follow-up to your ongoing directive, encouraging your ally when they successfully hit your target. Your ally gains a status bonus to damage equal to your charisma modifier. So why I think this feat in particular is so busted is that it's a once per round ability. It's not a reaction, it's a free action, and it gives a status bonus to your ally who has already successfully hit an enemy. So there's no downside to using this. The only downside is it doesn't stack. If you use the 2-action got him, for instance, normally your allies would get a status bonus to the damage. But by this level, it would only be, I think, +2? +3, I just double checked. But your charisma modifier is probably higher than that. So this just adds some free extra damage. Or if you use the 1-action get 'em just to give your allies, a status bonus to hit the enemy, then now, boom, some free extra damage. Now, there can be a lot of reasons for this, like secondary directive, for instance, allows you to tack on a 1-action get 'em to an enemy that you're attacking. And so you get the benefits of 2 directives and get them, and an ally still gets the benefit of the extra charisma modifier damage, which is really, really good. And there's no, the only cost of this feat is the fact that it's a feat you have to pick up. Other than that, there's really no reason not to as long as it procs, which is really, really good. So overall, hopefully I've managed to convince players out there that just because the Envoy is a charisma-based class, they're still insanely good in combat. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there who are like, duh, yeah, no one is saying it's not good in combat. That's not true. I've seen the comments. I've seen the messages. People want to do damage themselves, and they want to use the high stats to do it. And there's going to be people out there who are going to be upset that they can't use charisma to hit people, even though you can use charisma to deal damage in many ways with this particular class. But the Envoy really highlights one of the reasons why currently I'm like on the lookout for games outside of Paizo to be my new favorite TTRPG. I love Starfinder 2e. I love Pathfinder 2e. I played a ton of Pathfinder 2e. We have a campaign scheduled to play Pathfinder 2e in the future. I've enjoyed playing it plenty, but it feels like the game gives you a wave in the direction of skills and out of combat stuff and only really focuses on the combat things. Envoy is insanely good, and it's insanely good not for its combat capabilities, but what it can do outside of combat. I would rank Envoy as a S-rank class. It's so good. It's very well designed. It's the perfect support class in the game, and it has pretty much no weaknesses. As long as, and again, I got comments based on this, it's got no weaknesses for the sake of its overall design. It's a support class. It's supposed to do the thing. It's not supposed to do everything, but it does the things it does really well with very little hangups. It's really good. And I think it's really good. I just wish that a class like this had a lot more to do than just stuff focused on combat, I wish that there were mechanics and systems outside of combat that you could really chew into. People are going to disagree with me. I get that. This is going to be a controversial video. But I want you to know that the Envoy is really, really good. I fully support this class. I think it's really, really awesome. And I would be very tempted to play this if we played some Starfinder. I just wish that the game could provide more for the Envoy to do that wasn't just succeeding skill checks. You know what I mean? But hey, that's just my opinion. I would say let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, but most of you have already typed them out before you got to this point in the video. Thank you for interacting with the video. It helps the channel a lot. And hey, while you're all doing that anyway, you might as well subscribe, right? Might as well keep leaving comments on the videos. You're going to anyway, so you might as well know when the videos come up. And double hey, I should make mention, I have a partnership with Into the AM. I have a discount code for 10% off in the description below. I just had someone buy $120 worth of clothing from their site, which was really, really cool. They got this really sick deal where for less than $20 per graphic tee, you can get 3 shirts, which is really good, as long as you're using my discount code down in the description below. That's really cool. And I guess at the end here, I should have said this earlier, but also thank you to Paizo, who did send me Starfinder 2E for the sake of review. I would imagine that everyone would gather at this point that they haven't paid for my thoughts or my opinions. I hope the Paizo staff aren't, especially the Starfinder creators, aren't upset at me for what I said in this video. No, it's nothing against you guys. It's just I want more, you know? I'm just selfish. I just want more. I love Envoy. I think it's really, really well designed. I like everything about it. This video is just filled with angst I have for the community as a whole. And that's a me thing. So hopefully I didn't scare anyone away. But that's going to be it for me. Thank y'all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the rants and the bad luck to me. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.